My guest today is Gunner Lindbloom. A lot of you that follow my channel, I'm sure, probably already subscribed to his channel. And if you don't, we'll give you the links to that. Gunner is from Detroit. He was a mob associate in the Detroit crime syndicate, and his grandfather was Peter Tocco, which is he deceased?
Yeah, he's deceased.
Okay, and Peter was the brother of Jack Tocco, who was the
No, he was the cousin.
cousin. Okay, cousin,
Yeah.
cousin of Jack Tocco, who was the boss
Boss.
of Detroit. Gunner is the author of several books on his experiences, but also fictional books. We were discussing a little bit of that. We're going to go over that. The most recent published book being To Be a King. So, Gunner, obviously I have a lot of questions for you, but I really want to, before we start talking about your books and the writing, I really want to give my listeners a background on you for any of them that aren't, that don't know who you are, that are just learning of you for the first time, like your background. You grew up around that, obviously. But from my experience, people that have grown up around that either go one way or the other. Their family kind of pushes them away from the life, or in a Gotti type situation, their family pulls them into the life.
I mean, I get asked that a lot. Actually, I don't. I tell this story a lot to try and clarify it with people, so they get a good understanding of me or my family. So my mother was Grace Carmela Tocco, and she was the oldest of 5 siblings. So my parents divorced when I was 4, and I ended up living with my grandparents in Grosse Pointe. I don't know, for the next for several years. I mean, I lived there until I was like 11, but as a child, kids are perceptive. You learn pretty quick. You'd be shocked if you knew how perceptive a child can be. I knew at a very young age that we were different, and I didn't know, wasn't sure why yet. A year or two later, and the kid said, "I can't play with you anymore." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because my parents say you're in the mafia." So now my Uncle Pete Tocco, my mother's youngest brother,
Mm-hmm.
who's only 12 years older than me, so he's it's kind of young. He's a young kid himself. He's a teenager. And I asked
Now
him, Uncle
this
Pete,
is
like,
this is Peter Jr.
yeah, Peter
Okay,
Jr.
right.
So I say, "What's the mafia?" And he just kind of shrugs it off and says, "It's our family. You'll see." So now, of course, the movies like The Godfather come on, and everybody's talking about it, and they're talking in Sicilian. And back then, I could understand Sicilian, to a degree, and then the movie, they would talk about the movie, how authentic it was or wasn't, and stuff like that. So of course I watch it and I pay attention. I'm like, so this is what we are now. I'm noticing when I go to the market with my grandfather or my uncle, either my uncle Sal Tocco, which is Salvatore, which is my mother's other brother, who was older than my Uncle Pete, who was my favorite uncle as a kid. And so my grandpa owned a produce business in the Eastern Market. And the Eastern Market is basically Detroit's version of Little Italy. So it's a section of downtown Detroit that is just maybe, say like 5 blocks radius. And it's all produce and food businesses, meat, produce, dairy business, and it's all owned by the mob. The mob owns it all, and it still does, all to this day. And my grandpa owned a business down there called Tocco Produce, and it was a big business. He had the contract to deliver all the dairy and produce to Wayne County schools, all of the Wayne County schools. So in Wayne County is where Detroit is. So you're talking a massive contract. And I remember people would ask me later on in life, like, "Damn, how'd your grandpa keep that contract for 40 years?" And I kind of look at him like, "Really?" I kept it. And all the boss has to do, the boss gets the guy elected who makes the calls. So the boss, gets the city official in place. How does he do that? He tells the unions to vote for him. He's the guy who
Absolutely.
controls the vote.
Mm-hmm.
So he tells the unions to vote. Now they get in place, and then he gives the so all he does is give my cousin Pete this contract, and I'll give you a kickback. So I go live with my dad. He's an alcoholic, no supervision. I fail 8th grade. There's the irony there, is I get in so much trouble. I'm suspended so much that I actually fail 8th grade, so they bring me back to 8th grade a second time. And, of course, I do nothing the second time. Now I'm just the king of the school. By this point, I'm already selling drugs. I'm 15 years old. I'm coming to school. I got a freaking $600 coat, a big giant rope chain, gold chain. Everybody knows I'm a drug dealer. I'm just selling joints and crap, I'm just selling joints and little nickel bags, but it added up. They expelled me with 10 weeks left to go. I was 15 years old, and so I just took straight to the streets. My dad worked every day. My mom was in a mental institution. My dad was gone, so all I did was take to the streets, sell. So the main reason I really got into the weed game was because my dad, he didn't buy any food. I was starving. So I ended up driving my moped like freaking 10 miles across town to my weed dealer and begged him to front me some weed, and he did. And I just started grinding, and it didn't take me long, dude. Within 3 months, I got a freaking new car, all this money.
Well, that's the thing. You saw that the money was easy compared to working a 40, 50 hour a week job too. I mean.
Yeah, I was never gonna work. I tried to work. I had job washing dishes and stuff. It was just a nightmare. I hated it. But my uncles hooked me up with a job one time. I was like, I ended up working there. I'll tell you that story in a second because it's funny. In fact, in my Lindbloom Chronicles, I wrote about it where I was selling the fake perch. I was selling this guy white bass or silver bass, filleting them up and selling them to this high-end restaurant as perch and making $1 a pound on them. And
wow.
me and my boys could go out and catch like 200 pounds of them in one day, and because they're really easy to catch. And it was one of my first scams. So my uncle originally put me up to that job because the guy managing the place owed him like $20,000. He's for gambling and drugs. So my uncle said, well, you're going to go in there. Basically, the guy's going to give you a job as a baker, he said. He's like, you don't need to do nothing. You're just going to go in there once a week, pick up a check, bring it to me.
No show job, yeah.
That's it. They call it a sinecure job. So I was like, I'm like, all right, cool. So I'd walk in the back door of this high-end restaurant, like 5-star restaurant, beautiful place called Bobby Moore's Blind Fish, which would turn out to be owned, I to learn later, that it was owned by this huge coke dealer, man. I mean, like, huge coke dealer. His partner was Art Derrick, which is the guy that was White Boy Rick's plug. And these guys got busted. They landed a Lear jet that they bought from the Rolling Stones with 300 kilos in the Detroit City Airport. And he actually did 9 years on it and then beat it under appeal. But, and anyways, so actually the jet they landed, he owned the Rolling Stones. I'm sorry, they bought it. But the jet that he used to move the dope was leased. And he was able to convince the jury that I didn't know there was drugs in that plane. I just needed to get home in a hurry, so I leased a jet for $5,000 and it flew me home. How was I supposed to know there's 300 kilos of coke on it? I didn't own the freaking thing, and they bought it. And he got up.
Wow.
So yeah, so this guy was giving me his check every week, and I just walk in the back door, getting the chick who did the payroll didn't know that I really wasn't a baker. She just put the envelopes in this wall, and if it's yours, you can walk up and you grab it, your name and whatever. And then this guy who owed money, this guy's name Harry, this degenerate. And so all of this is going on when I'm like 15 years old, and now I'm expelled. So what happened is, they kicked me out of 8th grade, and when I get kicked out of 8th grade, I go to high school. They said, let the high school deal with them. We don't want them, and they kicked me out.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to high school. I last about, I think it was 9 weeks, and I get expelled. So I get expelled. I got a couple of fights, and just some real knuckleheaded, dumb stuff. And basically, that's the first time, and really the only time I ever saw my grandfather flex his name, and his pedigree. Because he wanted me to get back. I said, Grandpa, I want to go back to school. I want to finish school. Because all my friends were in school and all. So he arranged a meeting with the superintendent. We came in there, and he walks in there, and he looks around. And he says, do you know who I am? And the superintendent dude says, yeah, I know who you are, Mr. Toko. And he says, well, I want you to know something. I want my grandson to stay in school. I want him to graduate high school. And he's like, well, we don't want him here. He's not welcome here. And he's like, well, you know, I don't care what you want. Or he said, I want to see him graduate. He's like, all he does is get in fights. He's been busted in a stolen property ring. He comes to school reeking like pot. He hangs around a bunch of bad apples. He's like, we don't want him. You know, he's just been new.
Your primary racket on the street, was it predominantly drugs? Is that what you were mainly into?
At the time, yeah. At the time, it would later become a combination of everything. And that was one of the things I did. I think my biggest money makers for like was robbing drug dealers. It's too much work in selling drugs. I'd rather just work my way up the ladder to get like 20 or 30 or 50 pounds and put a pistol in their face and say I'm taking it, and that's that. And once they realized who I was and how I was cut, they weren't coming after me. So I just write it up.
Right.
I steal 30 or 50 pounds of weed, I don't have to work for freaking 3 months. You know what I'm saying? I can dump it, and now I'll be in the club, popping bottles or doing whatever I want to do, and I don't have to do nothing. Just go to the gym, hang out at the beach, chase girls, do nothing. And I still sold weed, of course, all the time. I'm selling weed. That's my main. I was always making, $800 or $1,000 or $1,500 a week from selling ounces and quarter pounds of weed. Steroids too, I made a bunch of money. I always probably made $400 or $500 a week on average selling steroids. And if a guy needed a freaking 8-ball, I'd go get it for him and make $50. That's the kind of guy I was. I wasn't, or if it was an ounce, I'd make $400. But I was never heavy into like heavy weight, because I knew the big weight guys are the guys who get robbed by guys like me. One guy will come along. I had no plans to put a bullet in anyone's head, but you don't know if there's a guy like me who doesn't care to put a bullet in your head.
Absolutely, right.
So when you said I could have got heavy in the weed. Oh, dude, I was connected in with heavyweight weed guys. Heavyweight. I mean, I could have walked right in and be like, I need 100 pounds. But these are friends more than anything. And then the problem is now when I go to deliver them, does that guy got a guy hiding in the closet, freaking with a freaking gun? He's gonna blow off my head and take the 100 pounds, $100,000 worth of weed's a lot of money,
Right.
And I've thought about it before, when I've seen big weight like that killing a guy and just taking it, but I'm like, it's not worth taking a human life over. But so when I was about 17, maybe 18, I don't know what it was, but my uncle started kind of bringing me around more. I started going to nightclubs when I was like 16, 17 years old, because I knew the bouncers, because they knew my uncle. All they had to do was walk up and say Pete Toko's nephew, or I'm Pete Toko's grandson, and it was the key to the city. I could literally go anywhere and just be like, I'm Pete Toko's grandson, and they'd let me in anywhere. And so, I mean, it didn't matter if it was the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club or it was a nightclub. Where I'm Pete Toko's grandson. I just got used to saying it. They just right in. That's how it worked. Or the nightclubs, they knew more like my Uncle Pete. I'm Pete Toko's nephew or Sal Toko's nephew. Going right in. So by the time I was 21, I was kind of almost sick of clubbing, man, because we went to the nightclubs in Windsor where you only have to be 19 to drink, and then all the nightclubs on the Detroit side. And so going back to at around age 19. I started working with Tony Giacalone. You know who that is?
Wasn't there a Giacalone that was around Tony Provenzano and all those guys?
Tony Giacalone was the guy that was Jimmy Hoffa was going to meet the day Hoffa disappeared.
Okay.
His mother's first cousin, which would make him my second cousin. So he married. I barely knew the guy, but I knew Tony because Tony was friends with my grandpa. Right. And so Tony, who's a very bad dude, he was like the Greg Scarpa of Detroit. So our families became close because his daughter married my cousin, and my grandpa was friends with him because Tony had a bunch of freaking bookies under him. Tony was, man, you just got to do some homework and read about that guy. What a freaking character this dude was. But he had blacks working for him, selling huge drugs. He had Jews bookies and Chaldean bookies, Arab bookies, and anyways, and so my grandpa was a layoff bookie who took all the layoff bets for Tony's bookies. So they were like partners on that, and you're talking millions of dollars changing hands at any given time. But all the old wise guys come over every day, and now I know who they are. Back when I was a kid, they were just my old uncles. This is your Uncle Nicky. This is your Uncle Paulie. This is your Uncle. I didn't know who the frick they were, but now, thanks to my Uncle Pete, I knew exactly who all of them were, where their rank was. I knew about La Cosa Nostra. I knew about the oath. I knew about everything. But anyways, they come over all the time. Paul Corrado and Tony Corrado and Paul Corrado too, but I didn't really know him. But Tony Corrado was my grandpa's Gombati. They talked freaking almost every day on the phone. And Tony Jack, Billy Jack, some of these Vincent Melee, just these guys are really powerful, high level mob dudes. They were on me all the time. But anyway, so Tony one day asked me if I wanted to make a buck. The first thing he did ask me to do major was like beat up a guy real bad who was he had a girlfriend on the side. Her ex came home drunk and smacked her around, and he called and she called him, and Tony called me and said, will you handle this for me? I said, yeah, Tony, no problem. Give me the address. So I went there and I freaking pulverized this dude real bad. You know what I'm saying? Just pulverized him. But moral of the story is Tony was impressed by that, so he started saying, you want to make a buck doing this, buck doing that, working security at dice and poker games, doing collections for my bookies,
right?
Working poker nights, working at nightclubs as a bouncer.
Yeah, that's a whole nother value, absolutely.
So then my grandpa's eyes went out around the same freaking time, started going bad, crashed a couple cars, not bad, like bounced off parked cars in the parking lot and stuff. And I said, Grandpa, let me drive you from now on. If you got to drive, let me drive you. I became like my grandpa's driver and drove him around. And we would go all day. The whole afternoon would be bouncing from one headquarters to the next of these, high level mob guys. Or
right.
It was either picking up money or dropping off money. That's it. And it was like a social thing. You go in and say, hey, Paul, how you doing? Good buddy. How's your so-and-so? How's your mother? How's your aunt? How's your sister? I heard so-and-so, blah, blah. And then there's, take this envelope, and then the envelope's stringing $20,000, and then, then we leave and we go pick up an envelope. Then we drop one, and that was it. We go to this car lot. Then we go to this bakery. Then we go to this restaurant. Then we go to this nightclub. And then we go back home, and that's how I met all these freaking. Not that I met them. Don't let me make that clear. I'd known them all my life, but I met them now in a way that
in a different way.
Yeah.
They know that you know what they really are.
Yeah.
And you really know what they really are. Now you're one of them. You're amongst them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So you got it. So there's a mutual understanding. But the only really one main one was Tony Jack. And his main thing, like the one that was consistent, was Tony. He always had bookies that needed a hand or somebody who needed to be extorted.
So you were his go-to guy at that point for that.
I was one of them. I assumed he had more than just me. I assumed he had several guys like me, but I don't know. And when he was my age, he was driving for Vito Tocco. Vito's the founding father of the Detroit Mob. He was his driver. Vito Tocco snatched him off the street. Him and his brother.
So was William Tocco, was that Vito's son?
Yeah, that's William. No, William Tocco is Vito.
Interesting.
Yeah, his real.
And you know what's interesting? Just doing a little bit of background on you and trying to understand your past family dynamic is that one of William's sons married one of Joe Profaci's daughters. And which is, it's interesting because it's like, granted, these are, it's like how all of these, it's like a very old world style thing. Like all these old mob bosses are marrying their daughters off to other mob bosses' sons, or
Chicago was married in too.
So, right. Well, and even further, because one of Profaci's niece married Joe Bonanno's son, Bill. So in a way, in a in-law kind of way, the Toccos are related to the Profacis, related to the Bonannos, and the common denominator is all three, Bonanno, Profaci, and Tocco, are all Sicilian.
I just did a show on my YouTube channel about a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna talk because I've had a lot of informants on my show. Tony Arlotta, John Panizzi, Slackhead, Richie Cantrella, Paul Cantrella,
right.
Larry, and then people were like, they get the stupid little beef with Jimmy Calandra, and then they're saying like, oh, you're a wannabe. I'm like, let me tell you something. I didn't rat. I did 13 years, and let me tell you why I didn't rat. I said I didn't rat because I wouldn't disgrace my grandfather. That's the reason. I wouldn't disgrace my family. When it's your family, at stake, not just, your skipper or some guy from the neighborhood who recruited you don't really give a shit about, you just, whatever, then yeah, guys might flip. But in Detroit, it's all cousins, and now you're flipping on your uncle or your father or your brother. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's all
and see, that's kind of interesting because Tampa is the same way too. In the Trafficani family, a majority of the family itself were all, meaning the actual members, the maid members, were either blood related or in-laws, or they were super close growing up since they were little kids in West Tampa or the Ybor City enclave, the Italian enclave. So I mean, these guys just didn't flip, you know what I mean? But no, I understand what you're saying, and a lot of those individuals you named I've interviewed on my channel too, and I know most of them. But look, everybody has their reasoning for doing whatever they do, but obviously the main predominant reason is that, they're facing maybe a murder conspiracy or a large racketeering sentence or whatever. Most people just don't want to do a huge sentence. And most of those people will admit that that's why that they did what they did, but other people have other excuses. And I'm not diminishing that their excuses aren't legitimate, It's not for me to say one way or the other. What was your charge that when you did 13 years?
Extortion, bank robbery, armed robbery, on weapons violation. There were 17 charges. So, I mean...
And what was your original sentence? I mean, you did 13 years. What did they...
It was 13 to 50 is what I got.
Right.
And I did 13.3.
Now, at the point that you got out of prison, were a lot of these older gentlemen that you operated with on the street, were they already pretty much deceased at that point?
Yeah, Tony died before I even went to prison.
Oh, okay.
So I stopped really seeing. Tony started getting sick when about like a year or two before I got locked up. I saw him a couple times, and then, but my grandpa was alive, Jack Tocco was alive, Tony Capriatto was around, but at this point I kind of knew his son Paul Capriatto, maybe it was his nephew. I never asked. And I have my own, like, these old men. Yeah, the only old men that I was around. But at this point, I was kind of in my late 20s and doing my own thing. And it's like me and my younger cousins. It was us now, not the old men. It was us.
Right. But I mean, but at the point that you got out of prison, were you done with the street at that point, or did you go back to the street?
No, are you kidding me, man? I got out 5 years ago, and
haven't been out on the street that long from doing that long sentence.
No, not even 5 years. No.
Right.
So
right.
I went away. I mean, the amount of stuff I could go on and on and on. Just if anyone wants to hear, I got 230 episodes on my channel.
Well, and that's what I'm gonna suggest, obviously, to my listeners and the people that subscribe to my channel. And again, I'm sure, a chunk of them probably already subscribe to your channel. I'm gonna be putting a link to Gunner's channel directly in the description box. But also, we're gonna talk about his book. I'm also going to put the links to everything in the description box. So when y'all are done hearing this interview, you need to go to Gunner's channel and check out his channel.
Yeah, I got. There's so many crazy stories, and it's not. I mean, I don't care. Like, no matter what you think, this might be crazy. I mean, there's some crazy ones. Some of the crap I was involved in, and it's not like big glamorous, huge things of money pouring in, murders and crap like that. Nah, it's just stuff that just happens in the street that a wise guy or a street hustler, it just happens. You get involved with things, go wrong, things go bad. Everything, nothing is planned. It's just crazy. So those are the type of stories you'll get at my channel. But anyways, moral stories. I ended up in prison, yes, for 13 to 50 years when I was 29 years old. And I just said, enough is enough, man. So I was like, I don't want that life no more. The old men, they're all dying off. My grandpa's retired. Tony's gone. Just some of the younger generation guys are coming up, and they're going to be coming in positions of power. And I just don't want to go back to that. I don't really care about none of them. They're all a bunch of freaking, like, mob brats, royalties. They all kind of born into royal bloodline, so they're going to get handed a button, multi-million-dollar businesses, and the street cred just because of their name. That's what's going to happen. It's already happening. I watched it happen by the time they were 20 years old. They're already getting all the freaking the street cred. As soon as
Right.
people knew who they were, and I'm thinking to myself, these guys ain't freaking tough guys. These guys ain't killers. They got daddy's name. They got grandpa's name. They freaking nothing. I mean, slap the shit out of them and take all their money. It would do nothing. But God bless them. I could care less. I'm just saying, I'm like, you feel like you got to earn them. Not saying there aren't tough guys in the Detroit family. There are. There's quite a few, actually. But there's a handful of guys who were just handed a button and said, here you go. And daddy handed them a
Of
multi-million-dollar
course. Their
business.
pedigree. Right.
And a sports book, that they took over with millions of dollars coming in. And so they got nothing. They didn't really earn it.
But usually those guys have a hard time hanging on to it. Look at John Gotti Jr. compared to John Gotti Sr. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of people.
Yeah, he's not cut for it.
You understand what I'm saying. And you're only as tough as the people that you have around you. I'm not just pointing at him. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
I
mean, I know. I'm thinking of a couple in my mind right now. I'm not gonna say their names.
You don't have to. Absolutely.
But I'm saying is, I don't fault them at all for. It's not their fault they were born a royal bloodline. It's not their fault that they had life handed to them on a silver platter. It's not their fault that the street cred was handed with their last name. And they're not tough guys. And you know what? They don't even really act like tough guys. They're a guy who could give an order or could get something done, but they're just guys who want to live life, make money, enjoy themselves, whatever. So they're not trying to be like me. I had something to prove for whatever reason. I had a chip in my shoulder, running around cracking people's heads and tearing up nightclubs, fighting and busting people. They weren't like that. They had no desire to do like that. Their name was enough to get them whatever they needed or wanted, and that was that, and it still is. So God bless them. I don't hold nothing against them. These guys in Detroit won't ever get that 50-year charge, and I'll tell you why. They got too much power over the government. They got too much power. They have friends in the feds. They got friends in the judges. Jack Tocco got convicted of RICO, for controlling the mob for 35 years or whatever. I think it was 30 years at the time, and he only got 1 year and a day in prison. Of course, because the judge was bought. Prosecution went in an uproar, insisted to come back. They appealed the sentence, brought him back, and gave him another 9 months. Moral of the story is you're not going to see guys in Detroit getting 50-year sentences, because they got too many friends that'll make sure they don't get 50-year charges. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna get tipped off before there's an indictment or an investigation that's going to lead to an indictment. They're going to get tipped to it ahead of time. They're going to bribe somebody. They're going to do whatever they can do to make it. That's why you don't hear about it. That's why you never hear about it. That's why right now Jackie Giacalone was just the boss of the family. He was just facing some tax evasion stuff, and everybody thought, oh no, he's gonna give names. He might give names because they wanted to know where he's getting all these money orders. All he arranges to make a $12,000 payment, and then now he's got to pay like a couple $1,000 a month tax and restitution. He's got friends. They're going to get him out of it. That's why you don't see these type of cases happen.
Yeah. Obviously, Detroit's renowned for controlling the unions. You have, like you pointed out earlier in the conversation, you control the unions, then that's
control votes.
Yeah, they control votes, and that's in its own way. That's a lot of power. That's a lot of power.
Yeah, that's judges. That's
right.
That's police chiefs.
Absolutely, up to the federal. Yeah, I mean, now you're talking Senate, congressional members, everything. Yeah, absolutely.
So and that's why they don't get, they even control the media. So I don't see articles in the newspaper. There's freaking New York Times and stuff are writing articles about Jackie Giacalone, but nothing in Detroit. Don't you find that a little ironic?
Right.
The New York Times, Wall Street Journal, because Jackie Giacalone's family got a $30 million lawsuit for his daughter's wrongful Macoma thing, and I don't want to talk about that. But at the moral of the story is they're doing all this national press. Nobody in Detroit will touch it. There's a reason for that, because freaking he doesn't even. That's the thing. He don't have to threaten nobody. He just says, "I don't want that. Don't for nothing." He just sends word, says Jackie don't want nothing in the paper about him. And then it goes up to the editor, and somebody says, "Oh, here's an article I wrote about Jackie Giacalone, the Alleged Mafia," and he's like, "Yeah, that's dead. So write something else." And that's how it goes. But so, anyways, that's where I wrote my books in prison. I started writing. I discovered I had this gift for writing, and I wanted to be a writer. I've always been a creator. I used to tell girls I'm going to make movies someday. I didn't realize it would be by way of novels. But I mean, I had nothing but time in the world, and when I was in prison, and I just started writing. Discovered I had this really unique natural gift,
Mhm.
and it came really, really natural to me. It just, I mean, I was a big reader, like I said, so I kind of assimilated syntax and grammar and things like that. Although I was a bad speller, but I got better as I went. But I mean, it just came super easy.
So
So that's
is To Be a King Volume 1? Is that Volume 1?
volume 1 and 2. Yeah, it's a volume. There's two of them. So it's
Okay.
To Be a King volume 1 and 2. And so just look at the reviews, about perfect 5-star reviews,
Right.
and a lot of them. I got like I don't know. I think I got 95 reviews on volume 1 and like 70 on 2. I'm surprised. I think the reason there's a discrepancy and there's only 70 is because people read. I already know why. People read 1 and go, "Wow, this is a really good book. It's very entertaining," but they don't. There's no resolution to it. So it's like they're like, I'll get to volume 2 when I get to it. They don't realize it. They don't realize how big of a story, how complex of a story it is until they actually read volume 2, and then they're like, holy crap. That's why everybody who finishes volume 2 always tells people who's buying volume 1, they're like, just do yourself a favor and get volume 2. You need it. You're gonna need
Right,
it.
and
Trust
read
me.
it back to back. Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah, yeah.
right.
It was all one story. It was just too long to publish. So it was one
Absolutely.
book.
Now, did you go through a publisher or did you self-publish?
I went to Amazon KDP. It's kind of a hybrid of both.
Okay, right. So essentially, they are a publishing house through Amazon, but you have your own authority of what to do with your book. You're not answering to an editor that's going
Yeah.
to be kicking it back to you saying, hey, this isn't working out, etc. So yeah, it is kind of the best of both worlds in that regard.
Yeah.
Right.
And you get to keep more of your royalties. But the problem is there's no marketing. You got to do all your
Your
own
own
marketing. But
marketing,
I did
absolutely.
pretty. I did pretty good on the marketing tip. These people
Well,
want
actually,
with
I'm
that.
gonna order the books. I want to read them. I'm gonna be promoting it. I want to know what I'm promoting, and so
I'm the same
I
way.
definitely want to. I definitely want to read it. I mean, obviously, it's in a genre that's, even with it
You
being
enjoy.
fictional, I'm definitely gonna enjoy it. I mean, as far
Well,
as
I
to what
mean,
the subject is, it intrigues me. So I'm already interested. Yeah.
I will tell you something. Some of the things that happen in the book are either inspired by true events, and the characters are inspired by real characters. Yeah, you don't know which, but my closest friends and family know who and which. And it's not much. It's not much of the book, but it's enough to
Right.
make you think. It's enough to make you realize there's a lot of the stuff in this book is actually, real. And you
Right,
just,
and I would assume that, and I would think other people would as well, because the setting is in Detroit, which is
and it's me.
your history. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but the thing is, bro, I wrote 9 novels in prison, and only 2 of them are of the mafia genre. So I'm a genre jumper. I just write what I enjoy, and I've written action suspense, like a paramilitary Tom Clancy type of
Right.
book. I wrote a military book about a guy's 3 tours in Vietnam, 2 sports team books. I wrote a romantic comedic drama. So I mean,
Yeah.
I jump around.
Diverse. Even though you were interested in reading, prison gave you an isolated time to almost like take a self inventory on yourself and to analyze
Yeah,
yourself, to where you had that time to set aside all these external influences and things that were going on, or things you needed to do to survive, to be able to start picking up a pen or a pencil and start jotting things down and start writing, and realizing for yourself that, shit, this is something that I can do. And hopefully you will start getting offers.
this story is kind of dear to my heart, and I don't. It's personal, and I don't want to ruin it. I have other lost leaders, other books that I could use. They're all good. They're all just as good. They all have a market.
Very cool. So for people that want to keep up with things that are going on with you and the progress of your writing and our release dates, book, what would be the best place for people to keep up with you on that?
I mean, what my website is. I have a website, GunnerDetroit.com. Got everything there. So when I release my new book, it'll be definitely front and center on my website.
Okay.
So GunnerDetroit.com. But YouTube is a great place to kind of stay abreast of everything I'm doing. I'm always dropping videos, and as I go get closer to publishing this book, probably I'm hoping by Christmas,
Right.
And that I'll have it edited, finally edited and formatted and ready to roll. And then so yeah, that's my website. But YouTube, you can check me out. I mean, I don't really go on Facebook a whole lot anymore. I don't find any ROI out of it. It's just kind of a wasteland.
Right.
And then
Absolutely.
and then Instagram, I'm on Gunner Detroit on Instagram. I post some stuff like there. Patreon ultimately is the place if you really want to know what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, my political stance and thoughts, stuff like that. It's patreon.com/Gunner Detroit. So
Okay.
check me out.
But also, I'm going to put a direct link to the Amazonic page where you can order To Be a King off of that. And are both volumes up on Amazon, Gunner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
Very
both there. So when you go to like volume 1, you kind of scroll down and it says things. These two books are recently purchased together.
Okay.
They have the two.
Right.
Or you can just go to Be a King volume 2, search it, and it'll pop up.
You know, the best thing you can do is go over to Gunner's channel, and if you aren't linked up to him yet, make sure you subscribe to his channel, hit the notification bell so you can kind of scroll through his history. I appreciate you doing this.
Anytime, man.